Hello and welcome. My name is Heath Jones, and I'm the pastor of Northwood Christian Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. For more about us, you may check out our website at indyncc.org. That's indncc.org. You're currently listening to a pre-recorded sermon that will be preached at our church this coming Sunday, or perhaps by the time you're watching this, it will have already been preached. But either way, we'd love to see you in person. So if you'd like, you can stop by. Our address is 4550 Central Avenue, Indianapolis, Indiana, and our service time begins at 10:45 a.m. on Sunday mornings. But for now, let's turn to today's text. And our reading is found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6, and we'll be reading through verses 27 till verse 38. And it goes, "But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. And you will be children of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back." Now, that was a lot. And if you just take each individual saying by itself, some of them seem impossible. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who hurt you. If you get popped, turn the other cheek. In the event someone takes your coat, give them the shirt off your back. Give to beggars. Who on earth could live like this? This seems impossible. Try it, and you're just as likely to get beat up, robbed, and taken advantage of. And then what? What will you have when it's all taken away? So I've got to say, come on, Jesus, tell us something we can believe in. Show us some way in which we can actually live. Oh, he did say, do to others as you would have them do unto you. Finally, something that makes sense. You'd be best to stop right there, Jesus, while you're ahead. But no, he plows right on. Don't judge or condemn. Writing off someone as if they were irreparable or a lost cause. Forgive and be forgiven. Give, and your generosity will come back round, says Jesus. Well, maybe. I have reason to believe that this may not always be the case. For example, at my last church, we were visited one Sunday by a man who told us that he was on his way north to visit his son in Michigan. His son, he claimed, was in prison. The trouble was he had made it as far as our small town and had run out of gas. He was very convincing. He even stayed for our after-church luncheon. And he was so convincing that our congregants and elders pitched in, scrounging up a wad of cash to give him a couple $100, if I can remember correctly. I myself rode with him to the gas station in his car and filled his gas tank with my own debit card. Then I sent him on his way with that wad of cash and a prayer. The man said he'd be back, but weeks went by, and then months, and actually I forgot about him eventually, until one evening I ran across a news report of a man who was traveling across central and northern Indiana, visiting churches with that same story and ripping them off. The news article had a picture, for the man had at this point been arrested, and guess who it was? You know who it was. It was, of course, the same man. That man who had come to our church and even had eaten lunch with us. So I didn't tell my congregation right away. I wasn't sure how we should feel about it. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I ranged from angry to questioning whether we had done the right thing. And I could just hear my congregants if I did tell them, that's what you get for helping a stranger. This is why we don't give to beggars. They're all lazy. You know the drill. And this pastor didn't want to hear those things from his congregants because our message has been, will always be one of love and generosity in the face of these sentiments. So I said nothing, and months went by, and then this text came up in the lectionary, and then I decided to tell the story. Because here was an instance when our community had been shaken down. He didn't take our coats, but he left with enough money to buy several coats. He didn't strike us, but he had poked at our dignity, to put it mildly. So I looked into the faces of my congregants, and their expressions after hearing the story ranged from bemused to extremely angry. And in that moment, we were a case study about what happens when you take some of the crazier words of Jesus seriously. I guess we should have known after all that talk of people stealing our coats and striking our cheeks, we should have known that this would happen. But again, the question, who can afford to live this way? Could my church afford to live this way in every instance and always? Who could possibly afford to live that way? Who does? Who could? And the answer is quite simply, God does. God lives this way. It's a tale as old as time. God's children destroying what God has made, laying ruin to God's creation, taking advantage of God's creatures, God's very children. Yet God has lavished blessing on creation, yet many who have received these gifts have taken these good things for granted. Many have used what they've been given to cause harm to others and to actively ruin what is good. Yet God continues to give. This is the very nature of God's love, of God's essence. Turns outward and further out, expanding and covering the universe, showering us with the blessings of life, water, food, friendship, community, and many other things besides. And God continues to be kind to the ungrateful. And when we are kind to the ungrateful, the text reads, your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. And then later, verse 37, do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. So give and it comes back. That's the point. Give and it will be given you. Well, what exactly will be given you? Because I'm pretty sure my congregation was out that money that we gave that con man, and we never did see it again. So what exactly did we get back when we practiced that sort of kindness or acted out of that kind of mercy? Well, to answer again with another story. One that I've told before, but it fits so well, I really don't have a better one. Again and again, I am taught the lesson given me by the man named Marvin Serber. He was a farmer at my last church, and when he died, his children told me the story as we were preparing for Marvin's funeral. I had asked them to tell me stories about their dad, good stories that spoke to his wisdom, virtue, and Christ-likeness, and this is what they told me. They told me a story about how a neighbor had struck a deal with him. And the deal was that they would share Marvin's farm equipment to harvest their hay, the hay that they would feed their livestock with and feed their animals with. In fact, Marvin would harvest that man's hay himself with his own tractor, leaving it in bundles for his neighbor to use as needed. And the man was supposed to, in turn, pay Marvin back for his hard work and the generous use of his farming equipment, which is not cheap. When the time came for the man to pay Marvin, he at first avoided him, and when Marvin confronted him, he flat out refused. Just said, "No, I'm not going to pay you." This is after the hay had been harvested and was sitting in bundles in this man's barn. And his children, who were young adults at the time, were furious at the situation. And you can imagine why. They said, "Dad, how could you allow this man to rip you off, to take advantage of you in this way?" To this, he replied with words that have changed my own life. He said to his kids, "If he can live with it, I can live without it. If they can live with it, I can live without it." Question: who in this story ended up with more? Who in this story was rich in the ways that really mattered? Who is really blessed by this interchange? And therein lies the point. And his children were changed by the love and grace they saw demonstrated by their father. And I was changed by this story, for it plays in the back of my mind every time I help someone, even as I suspect that they are taking advantage of me. If they can live with it, I can live without it. But here's the thing. Marvin was simply living in light of the words of Christ. The purpose of these teachings are to switch up our priorities, to give us different values and different goals in life. If our purpose is to protect our assets and our bodies at all costs, then this is truly crazy talk. One should not live this way if one's goals is to end this life on top, having bested our enemies and having put our persecutors in their rightful place. But if our purpose is to participate in the mercy and love of God, the mercy and love and grace that God has lavished on all creatures and all creation, then this is profound wisdom. These words of Jesus are profound wisdom. The words of old Marvin Serber are profound wisdom, because you never know what such mercy and kindness will do for you and for the one on whom you give it. It opens avenues of grace that never were there before. When violence is met with violence, well, we already know what happens. It's the story of humanity writ large. When resources are hoarded and kept from the deserving and undeserved alike, well, we already know what happens. It's the story, again, of humanity writ large. But when hatred, greed, and exploitation are met with love, generosity, and trust, there is the potential that hearts will be changed. There is the potential, too, that you will be crushed again and again. But the potential that hearts will be changed. And if you don't believe me, well, it's the very heart of our faith. Jesus met hatred, greed, and violence with love, mercy, and peace, and he was killed. But one centurion, one Roman soldier, changed his mind that day at the foot of that cross. Then the disciples who had fled in fear would change their minds as well. There was a man who owned a tomb, and he changed his mind. Then Jesus rose from the dead, demonstrating that even if they rob you, beat you, and kill you, it's not the worst that they can do to you. The fact is, the worst that they can do to you is to calcify your heart, to leave you with a hard heart, a heart of stone, or a heart of anger, or a heart filled with greed, or a heart filled with hate. Marvin's children were heading that way until they were checked by their father's words. And that way is a different kind of death, and some have named it as hell. But if you love your enemy and turn the other cheek and give of yourself, your coat, your shirt, or even your life, what's the worst they can do to you after you've bathed in the bright sunlight of Easter morning? And the love we reflect in these moments, that love will change the world. It has changed the world. People began to tell the story of Jesus and his love. This love we're talking about that he modeled. And his body became the church. And here we are, we who have hated, lashed out in anger, and have failed to be merciful as our God has been merciful to us. But because our God has been merciful, we have been met with grace upon grace. And in turn, we have been changed by this love, transformed, and now it's time for us to model this love to the world. In this passage today, in Jesus' Sermon on the Plain, Jesus invites us into the life and love God has demonstrated to us consistently from the beginning of time. A love that has been shared with the least deserving. A love that has changed hearts and lives. A love that will save us in the end. A love that will save us in the end. Jesus has invited us to share in this life, to be children of the Most High God. We will become mirrors that reflect God's love out into the world, or to cite a colloquialism, then we'll be chips off the old block. Now, all things considered, what should I have done in regards to that thief who visited my church that Sunday? And that question has plagued me in the years that followed. And I must confess, there is never a perfect answer. But here's the point, I think. When we encounter the brokenness in the world and all the broken people, we are given an opportunity to transform the world and to transform the lives of others. And so we must view them through the lens the gospel gives us and love them as God has loved us, so that we may be changed and so that they may be changed. We have, after all, been changed and transformed by this love, but it will be hard to do this. These words of Jesus in Luke chapter 6 are a guide, but they are hard, but they are words that temper our actions. They call us to a radical kindness and a dangerous love, even if we risk being taken for fools, because in the end, this love is our only hope, the world's only hope. This love is what will change the world, has changed the world, is changing the world, and changing our lives. So what's left for us now is to share this as best as we are able, however imperfectly, and to try to live as Jesus has taught us. Who can live this way? Well, God can. God does. And we are God's children, and so we should try. Who can live this way? God can. And so should God's children.